Hey everyone, thank y'all for joining my session today. It's called Making Better Decks. I am going to be covering really just simple tips for you to help get started in creating them, going through that process, getting unstuck and what all of that is like. So if you have any questions during the talk, feel free to put them in the chat. If there's time for Q&A, I will answer some questions. If you need slides for any reason, there's a link to download them. You can use my template. I've also included speaker notes and image descriptions. You can go to bit.ly/makingbetterDecks. That is again bit.ly, bit.ly/makingbetterDecks. And so what I'll be covering today is pretty much why folks use slides and getting started, maybe some design tips here and there, and then once finished, prepping slides for the day of. But before we get started, just a little bit about me. I'm T, I design stuff. I'm currently a product designer at Rally Health. I know it says that I'm a designer in my title and it's in my profession, but making slides is actually the least favorite part of my process. This was me pretty much during the entire time of making slides. It's me going, I don't want to do this. And it's because it's challenging making slides, right? And I think a lot of us feel this way when it comes to this entire process. So that's pretty much why I'm here today, is to share like my expertise that I've gathered over the years. This is me at Lesbian Sue Tech and 500 startup events, and it's a variety of photos of me there. If you've ever attended these events, I've been that person behind the scenes. And I pretty much did, this for 5 years and did it for over 100 events and dealt with over 500 slides. And so the reason why some folks might use slides, is pretty much that to really help be able to tell that story and be able to give more visual context of following information, making it a lot easier. Slides are visual, they are kind of like movies, comics, transcripts, videos, or books in a way for people. It's a lot faster to process the info for those that prefer that route, can really help us keep focus, and they can help, the context of what you're speaking convey that emotion. While keeping that in mind, there's 3 different types of learning styles for people in the world. The first is visual learning by seeing. Second is auditorial learning by hearing. And then the third is tactile learning by doing. And so with slides and talk, it kind of is a combination. And I want to point that out, the different learning styles, because 5 billion people in the world are visual learners. So that's 65% of the world's population. So that's a lot of people that fall in that first category of visual learning. And so, like I said, combining the mix is kind of the best way to go about it. And combining speaking and slides really hit on 2 of those. And another thing to keep in mind when it comes to slides is that there's like 314 million people who are visually impaired in the world, and that's the size of the US population. So anyone in your audience may include people from this category. So a lot of the tips that I'll talk about today hopefully will help improve that readability and have accessibility in mind. So where do you even get started? Just like any creative process, the way that I tend to get started is by getting inspired. So I like to start with making a mood board, just like collecting all the inspiration that you can find online. like looking at all the presentations that you saw today, for example, and maybe taking screenshots of layouts you love, maybe looking at TED Talks, looking at any and everything that you see on Google search. I start by making a mood board, and that really helps get inspiration to get started and get unstuck. And then the second thing I like to do is create a storyboard. A storyboard can help visualize your presentation before you can get started, because it's kind of difficult to just jump right into trying to create and design. So a storyboard might help with taking your talk and turning it into a little bit more something visual. So if, for example, this is image of my storyboard on a 4x4 grid with a bunch of sketch notes and everything. But the most important thing that I try to capture within each box is that one idea or one theme that slide is about. So that's super important to just try to remember as you go through it. Then when it comes to making slides, you've got that inspiration, you've got that idea, then it comes to the hard part, right? There's a variety of examples of tools and templates that people tend to use. The most common one is like PowerPoint, Keynote, and Google Slides. I think in general, you should just use whichever one you're most comfortable with. I tend to gravitate towards PowerPoint and Google Slides just because that's the one I'm most comfortable with, and I like how it's the most accepted format at events. And then there's also Prezi, Canva, Adobe Spark at the bottom here, which tend to be a little bit more cloud-based. They all have really great resources, a lot more newer, modern templates to work with and start with. Typically, it's not the in format people accept, so you need to convert into a PowerPoint or a PDF. And so once, so I pretty much, like I mentioned, when it comes to once I've chosen that tool that I'm going to use, then I've gathered all that inspiration, then it's like getting started to making the templates, right? This is a screenshot of a website called Blue Wolf. I generally just liked how the type looked in this bottom left corner of the footer. And that was my inspiration for the divider page and title page of my talk, of this presentation. And so I just kind of took that and then put it in a slide. And that helped me get started. And on a high level, when we think about slides, they're kind of just like three layouts for templates that you have to think about. There's the title page, there's the divider page, and then there's the main page with all your content. And if we think about slides, they're kind of like structured like books, where there is, a title and a cover page, a chapter page, and then the main page. And so when you get started, it's the easiest to, for sure, make like the title and divider page first, and then jumping into the content. And when we think about content, you probably want to start with also maybe trying to decide what color goes with your templates. I like to kind of dig into Adobe Color or Color Lovers, which are really great places to look at palettes and color. I took one of the purples here, and you might see it in my presentation as just a decorative color. That's how I found just some of the colors that are present today. And there are a bunch of people talks earlier that talked about color contrast. And color contrast is super important to also consider. You kind of want to think about color contrast where it's taking the text and then the background color. And you want to make sure that color contrast is a ratio of 4.5 to 1 ratio. And the way to kind of check on that is taking the hex color within the advanced color settings, If you take the color of the text color and then the text color of the hex color of the background color, then you can go into a color contrast checker. The one I use is called Colorable. And if you insert the hex colors within this tool, you then get this number ratio at the top that tells you what the number is. And so I, for example, took some example colors, and the ratio here is 6.43, which is above 4.5. So I like to use that as a general base for my colors when I'm creating my slides. And a super good sort of guideline to use for your templates is when it comes to font choices and font sizes. I only like to have variations of 1 to 2. Maybe I'll use the same font throughout the slides or the same font size throughout the slides. So a good guideline base is maybe for if I want some sort of variation, then I'll do 1 for headline and then 1 for body copy. And for font sizes, as a good rule, I like to go 24 points or even higher. The bigger, the better, but it's depending on what sort of content that you have in your slides. And it's the general rule I like to use for font colors too, as in order to just keep it simple. So 1 for copy, and then maybe there's 1 for something that's decorative to highlight and create focus. And for copy guidelines, I think people tend to just drop a bunch of copy within slides, and it's best to go as much less of a copy as possible. So a good rule of thumb is 3 to 5 words, maybe for a headline, 1 to 2 sentences for body copy. Even less is even better, but you want to make sure it's simple, clear language that's at like 6th grade reading level. And another great thing is thinking about indicators, which can help with colorblind and focus for people. Super critical for data, tables, charts, highlighting areas. Examples of indicators are like borders, lines, shapes, icons, weight, and sizes. So for example, I've got like 2 circles at the bottom here, which are the same shape and size, but different color. But for someone who's colorblind, they won't actually be able to tell the difference between the 2. So I've got an example on the right where it's a circle and then a square next to each other. And those 2 could have then 2 different meanings, and it's easier for people to distinguish. And so with these general tips in mind, like I said, people tend to maybe put too much content into slides, but the trick is really about figuring out ways to make it simple and visual by like deleting as much as possible. So I'm constantly going through my slides and like trying to delete as much stuff as I can. And this is a quote from Chris Anderson, the author of TED Talks, where he talks about like just going through people's slide decks and deleting and deleting and deleting. So for example, I'm going to take this random body copy of the First Amendment, and it's a huge block of text. We see it all the time, sometimes on slides. Based off my tips, what if I, underlined or bolded a piece of type within the body copy, right? It's a lot easier for people to scan. You can also tell the headline is a different size, so it's easier to tell that those are 2 different bodies of copy. An example of moving even more copy would be, just taking out the body copy in general, that huge block of text, and pulling out those 2 points that are most important and making it huge. But even further, I could remove the text, just have an image of people to talk about what my point is. So this is an image of people outside the White House at a protest. And so then I could, for example, talk about the right to assemble and freedom of speech by using just this image. Places to find really great imagery, though, that is free and are great for using is libraries like Flaticon, Giphy, Unsplash, Creative Commons, Pixabay, or Flickr. I tend to go as much as I can with the highest quality of image. I also try to give credits for those images that I take. And you also want to check like license usage just in case. And for a lot of my presentations, I tend to go a lot more abstract and choose icons over images. Other great libraries to use that are a lot more diverse is like the Woman in Tech Chat, or the Vice Gender Spectrum Collection, or even the Mapbox Queer and Tech series for diverse photos. So there's also really great stock photography out there that's a lot better than Google searching. So I've given tips on how to make it. Now that you've got your slides ready, then it's really about like, how do you even prep for events the day of or before? And I personally like to research and ask about AV setup of the event or where you would be speaking. So whether it's in person or virtual, there are so many bad things that can go wrong. And some things can affect actually how slides look. So where are you presenting, event location, lighting of the effects. So lighting can affect how you read on digital screens, as well as the audience distance from your slides can also affect how people read it too. So taking that in account, and when you research the venue, if it's in person, and then if you're virtual, since we're all very much virtual, then it's, reading the documentation of how to screen share and make sure to check out how slides look on certain virtual streaming platforms. And then you want to check and figure out like what device is your slides displayed on. And for example, is it displayed on a monitor? Is it going to be displayed on a tiny laptop? And it makes a big difference in terms of whether you want to have your slides widescreen or full screen. And so that's important to research and make sure. And then to add on to that point, like Google Meets and Zooms is an example here where the real estate of the slides to the actual laptop size, in addition to the speaker box and live captions, the window display of my slides is way, way, way smaller than it should be. Like if there wasn't a speaker box and live captions or things like that, then it would probably be the size of my monitor, but it's not. So just take that account when you're designing slides for folks. And also, does my slides have live captioning? That's important for when you're at events. If they don't have it, so some tools do have it built in, like PowerPoint and Google Slides. If not, you want to ask the AV folks at events if they have it. And y'all should thank the actual live captioner person who is captioning this event too. So that's super exciting because it's a lot more accurate than using captioners. And so you also want to make sure to ask about like, how's the Wi-Fi where I am? How do I advance my slides? What are the formats that are accepted at this event? Because that's super critical, as Wi-Fi and all of that can factor how your slides look. So again, event space, streaming platforms, AV equipment, all of that is super critical and important to take note. And then also the day before and all of that, you want to, practice, test the slides, and attend tech walkthroughs. Because I will actually change the day before, or, if I notice that the slides don't look good in actual tech walkthroughs. So for example, I found out that there's a projector at this event, and I did a tech walkthrough, and I had to change my slides format the day before. So once you've done that, you are pretty much done. Like, you should give yourself a pat on the back because you did the hardest part of your talk, which is creating slides. So yay, good job, time to celebrate. And that's pretty much my talk for today. You can check out my website for templates, checklists, and I also have a blog post on there that goes into more specifics. You can go to my website at tsripunv.com, or you can send me an email if you want any feedback on slides. Thanks.